The first time it happened, Marcus Bryant had let it slide. He was sipping his coffee on a calm Sunday morning when he caught a flicker of movement at the far end of his property. His house sat on 10 acres, surrounded by a tall wrought iron fence he'd installed years ago for privacy. Privacy wasn't something the HOA seemed to respect. He watched in disbelief as a man in a neon yellow vest, one of the self-appointed HOA patrol volunteers, climbed awkwardly over his fence, dropped down onto his grass, and started walking with the air of someone who owned the place. Marcus had nearly spit his coffee out, who in their right mind thought it was normal to climb another man's fence. He walked down the porch steps and called out, "Hey, what the hell are you doing on my property?" The man, tall, mid-40s, with a clipboard under his arm, jumped as though caught stealing cookies from a jar. But instead of looking ashamed, he puffed out his chest. "Routine inspection. HOA business. Just checking for violations." Marcus froze. Violations. This was his land, private land he had bought and maintained himself. He wasn't renting, he wasn't borrowing. And yet this stranger was standing on it like it belonged to him. "You have exactly 10 seconds to climb back over that fence." "Before I call the sheriff," Marcus said flatly, his voice low but sharp. The patrol volunteer muttered something about rules being rules, but he didn't dare test Marcus's tone. With an awkward scramble, he pulled himself back over the fence. Grumbling about how some homeowners just don't understand compliance, Marcus thought that was the end of it, but it was. By the second time, he wasn't surprised. He spotted another man, this one shorter, heavier, with a baseball cap pulled low, creeping along the inside of his fence with a tape measure. It was broad daylight, and Marcus had been trimming hedges. He stopped mid-cut, the shears dangling in his hand, and raised his eyebrows. The man tried to wave it off. "Just making sure your hedges aren't encroaching on the allowable perimeter." "On my land?" Marcus asked, incredulous. "HOA regulations, sir," the man said smugly. Like the words were supposed to carry divine authority, Marcus had walked right up to him, taken the tape measure from his hand, and thrown it over the fence. "You don't walk onto another man's land without permission. Ever. If I catch you here again, I won't just be calling the sheriff, I'll press charges." The patrolman had scuttled away like a raccoon caught in a trash can, Marcus thought. Maybe that would scare them enough. Maybe the message had been received. But by the third time, he realized the HOA patrol wasn't just being nosy, they were being bold. Too bold. It happened late in the evening, right as the sun was setting. Marcus had been sitting on his porch, feet up, glass of iced tea in hand. He saw the shadow first, a figure moving awkwardly over the top of his fence, like some kind of burglar. He leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. Sure enough, another HOA patrol member, this one with the same neon vest. Clipboard clutched tight, was lowering himself down. Marcus didn't even get up this time. He let the man land on the grass and dust himself off, and calm as can be. Marcus called out from the porch, "You ever stop to think what would happen if the wrong homeowner caught you trespassing like that?" The man startled, whipping his head around. He hadn't seen Marcus sitting there in the shadows. Just following procedure. We've had reports you're building an unauthorized structure in your backyard. This is a compliance check." Marcus tilted his head. "It's an unauthorized structure? You mean my tool shed? The one you can see perfectly fine from the road?" The man blinked, caught off guard. "You don't need to climb my fence to see it." Marcus continued, his voice dropping. "You just like the power trip?" The patrol volunteer stammered. "It's protocol. I'm within my rights." Marcus stood, and even from a distance, his presence was enough to silence the man. "No, you're not within your rights. You're trespassing. I've let this slide 3 times now, but 3 is the last straw." The man began backing toward the fence, muttering something about reporting Marcus for hostility toward HOA patrol. Marcus let him climb back out. He didn't stop him. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten, because by then Marcus already knew what he was going to do. They thought his land was theirs to invade. They thought fences were nothing more than obstacles to be ignored. But Marcus had been raised on lessons his grandfather drilled into him. If you want people to respect your boundaries, sometimes you have to make those boundaries undeniable. So the next morning, he got to work. It wasn't complicated. Marcus was an engineer by trade. He'd worked with electrical systems, built generators, and repaired circuits most men wouldn't dare touch. He already had the tools in his workshop, and the fence was made of sturdy wrought iron perfectly conductive. Wasn't trying to hurt anyone, but he was damn sure going to make them think twice before climbing over his property again. He rigged the gate first, wiring it to a low-voltage current not lethal, but strong enough to jolt. It was no worse than an electric livestock fence, the kind farmers had used for decades to keep animals contained. Anyone foolish enough to climb would get a shock they'd never forget, and Marcus, he'd be watching. That evening, he dragged a chair out onto the porch, iced tea in hand, and leaned back with a view of his gate. The sunset painted the sky orange and purple, casting long shadows across his yard. He didn't have to wait long. Like clockwork, the HOA patrol showed up. This time, it was two of them clipboard man from before, and another volunteer Marcus hadn't seen yet. They walked along the perimeter like hounds circling prey, whispering to each other, pointing at his shed and his fence like it was all some grand violation. Marcus hid his smile behind his glass. He knew what was coming. Sure enough, clipboard man slapped the fence once, testing it. Then, with the same arrogance as before, he began climbing. Marcus leaned forward slightly, heart ticking faster. And then it happened. The man yelped an ugly, startled cry as the current bit into him. His hands flew off the bars, his clipboard clattered to the ground, and he scrambled backward in panic. Falling into the grass, his partner rushed forward, confused, trying to help him up. Marcus chuckled low, sipping his drink. From his porch, he called out, his voice carrying across the yard. Trespassing's a hell of a shock, isn't it? Two men froze, their heads whipping toward him. Marcus didn't move, didn't raise his voice, didn't threaten. He just sat there, calm as stone, watching them with a look that said everything. One who'd been shocked, stuttered, "Why you electrified your fence?" Marcus shrugged casually. "I secured my property. Farmers do it all the time. Perfectly legal." He set his glass down on the table beside him. "You want to test it again?" The two men scrambled back, muttering to each other in a panic. Dragging their clipboard and tape measure like wounded soldiers, Marcus didn't move. He just leaned back in his chair, the faintest grin tugging at the corner of his lips. For the first time since he'd moved into that HOA-controlled neighborhood, Marcus felt something he hadn't in years: peace. But what he didn't know then, what he couldn't have known, was that this was just the beginning. 'Cause Karen, the HOA president, wasn't about to let his act of defiance go unanswered. And the next move in their battle was going to shake the entire neighborhood. Karen Whitfield didn't like to be challenged. She wasn't just the president of the HOA. In her mind, she was the queen of the community. Rules weren't suggestions to her, they were weapons, and she wielded them like a sword. For years, she'd built her little empire, stacking committees with loyal allies, handing out violations like candy, and scaring homeowners into submission. Most people had long since stopped fighting her. They just paid the fines, kept their lawns manicured to her liking, and prayed she wouldn't find another reason to show up on their doorstep. But Marcus Bryant? He was different. From the moment he moved in, Karen had sensed trouble. He wasn't deferential, wasn't eager to fit in. He kept to himself, paid his dues without complaint, and made it clear he wasn't interested in the neighborhood. Politics she thrived on. For Karen, that was an affront in itself. When people didn't bend, she felt compelled to break them. So when her patrol volunteers came back red-faced and rattled, stumbling over themselves about how Marcus had electrified his gate, she nearly lost her composure. "He what?" she demanded, slamming her manicure against the table in the HOA meeting room. "He rigged the fence," one stammered. "I touched it, and got it nearly knocked me flat. My arm's still tingling." Karen's eyes narrowed. "That man thinks he's clever," another volunteer chimed in. "He said it's legal, like farmers do with their cows. But this is a residential community. You can't have fences like that, it's dangerous. What if children wandered near it?" Karen stood up slowly, her posture rigid, her lips pressed thin. The fluorescent lights overhead glinted off her gold necklace as she leaned forward. "Children aren't climbing fences. You were. And don't forget why we have every right to inspect his property. He thinks he can humiliate us, make a mockery of the rules. Not in my neighborhood. Her voice grew sharper with each word until the room of volunteers was silent. She straightened her blazer, smoothed her skirt, and adjusted her pearl earrings. "File it," she said curtly. "An official violation notice. Unsafe modifications to property. Failure to cooperate with compliance checks. I'll draft it myself. By the time I'm done, Marcus Bryant will wish he never moved here." The volunteers nodded nervously, eager to escape her wrath. But even as they shuffled papers, Karen wasn't satisfied. She wasn't after just a violation. She wanted to make an example of Marcus, show the entire neighborhood that resistance was futile. That night, she sipped her wine on her back patio. Her mind was already churning. She thought of Marcus, sitting smugly on his porch, sipping tea while her volunteers scrambled away like frightened animals. The image burned her. No, this wasn't going to be a simple fine. She was going to crush him. Meanwhile, Marcus had no illusions about Karen. He knew the HOA president wouldn't let the fence incident go quietly. If anything, he was certain she'd escalate. That was the thing about people like her, they thrived on control, and when you took even a shred of that away, they'd claw at you until they got it back. He spent the following week keeping watch. Every morning, he drank his coffee on the porch, scanning for any sign of the patrol. Every evening, he sat with his tools, fine-tuning the wiring on his gate and fence, ensuring everything was safe but secure. And all the while, he noticed the shift in the air. Neighbors walking their dogs gave him wary looks. Parents tugged their children a little closer when passing by. The whispers had started. Karen was talking. She was spinning the story in her favor. Marcus was dangerous. Marcus was unstable. Marcus had turned his yard into a death trap, and with each retelling, the details grew wilder. Soon, people weren't just gossiping about an electric fence. They were speculating about hidden weapons, traps in his yard, even paranoia about cameras trained on them. Marcus knew it was Karen's handiwork. She wanted him isolated, alienated, cut off from the neighborhood. That way, when she made her next move, no one would lift a finger to defend him. The notice came on a Tuesday morning. He found it taped to his gate, printed on crisp white HOA letterhead, with Karen's signature at the bottom. It accused him of multiple violations, unsafe property modifications, endangering community members, refusal to grant access for inspection, failure to comply with prior warnings. The fine was absurd, thousands of dollars, but it wasn't the number that got him. It was the line in bold at the bottom. Failure to comply within 14 days will result in legal action, including possible foreclosure proceedings as outlined in HOA bylaws. Marcus read it twice, then laughed bitterly. Foreclosure. They were threatening to take his home over a fence. He crumpled the paper in his fist, tossed it into the fire pit on his porch, and lit a match. The notice curled and blackened. As the flames consumed it, Karen wasn't playing games anymore. Neither was he. For days, the tension mounted. The patrol no longer climbed his fence, but they hovered nearby, peering through binoculars, snapping photos with their phones. Marcus didn't bother hiding his disdain. He'd wave cheerfully at them, sometimes holding up a glass of lemonade, as though daring them to trespass again. Inside, though, he was preparing. He wasn't naive. Knew Karen's next step wouldn't be just another notice. She'd call in outside forces. When that happened, he intended to be ready. The breaking point came on a Friday evening. The sun was low, casting long golden beams across his yard. Marcus was grilling on the porch, the smell of smoked ribs wafting through the air, and he saw the familiar flash of a blue uniform at the end of his driveway. 2 police cruisers rolled up, lights flashing, but sirens off, the kind of quiet intimidation Karen loved. Behind them trailed Karen herself, perched in the passenger seat of her Lexus. Sunglasses on, lips pursed with satisfaction, Marcus set down his tongs, wiped his hands, and stepped to the edge of the porch. He watched as the officers got out, hands resting casually near their holsters, trying to project authority. "Evening," Marcus said evenly. One officer glanced at the other, then cleared his throat. "We've had reports of unsafe modifications on your property. The HOA's filed a formal complaint. We need to take a look inside the gate." Karen stepped out of her car before Marcus could reply, strutting toward the driveway like she owned it. "This is what I was telling you," she announced loudly, her voice dripping with fake concern. "He's created a dangerous situation for the whole community. Children could be hurt. Pets. He refuses to cooperate, and I won't have this." Neighborhood endangered by one man's arrogance, Marcus kept his eyes on the officers, ignoring her theatrics. "Do you have a warrant?" The question caught them off guard. "Well, no," one admitted. "But the HOA? The HOA doesn't issue warrants?" Marcus cut in sharply. "This is private property. Unless you have paperwork signed by a judge, you're not stepping 1 foot past that gate." Karen gasped, like she'd been slapped. "Are you seriously refusing a police order?" Marcus turned to her finally, his expression calm but firm. "I'm refusing your order. Don't confuse the two." For a moment, the air was taut as a pulled wire. The officers shifted uncomfortably. They hadn't expected resistance, certainly. Not from a man who looked as composed as Marcus did. Karen, clearly rattled, scrambled for footing. "This is outrageous," she shrieked. "You're obstructing law enforcement. You're endangering the neighborhood. Arrest him. Arrest him now." But Marcus didn't flinch. He crossed his arms and waited. The officers exchanged a glance. They weren't stupid, they knew a homeowner standing calmly on his own porch wasn't grounds for arrest, not without a shred of legal authority. One of them muttered something to Karen about taking it up with the county. Before stepping back toward the cruiser, Karen's face flushed red, her composure cracking. She shouted after them, her voice shrill, but it was no use. The cruisers pulled away, leaving her standing alone in the driveway. Trembling with rage, Marcus picked up his tongs, flipped a rib, and called out casually, "Smells good, doesn't it? You should try minding your own business sometime." Her jaw clenched, her fists shook, and she stormed back to her Lexus, peeling out of the driveway like a teenager throwing a tantrum. Marcus knew then, this wasn't over. Karen would never let it end like that. If anything, she'd just been humiliated in front of her own soldiers, and that would only make her more dangerous. But Marcus wasn't worried. If Karen wanted a war, she was about to learn he was more than capable of finishing it. And what happened next would turn their petty neighborhood feud into something much bigger than either of them had imagined. Marcus knew the quiet after the storm was deceptive. Karen wasn't the type to retreat and lick her wounds. She was the type to regroup and plot vengeance. The weekend passed without a peep from her, but he could feel the energy in the neighborhood shift, like everyone was holding their breath. The gossip train slowed. The patrol volunteers disappeared from their usual lurking spots, and Karen herself seemed to vanish entirely. But Marcus wasn't fooled. He dealt with people like her before, back when he worked construction contracts in big cities. Bullies never stayed down. They just waited for the moment. They thought they could hit hardest. That moment came Monday morning. The sound of heavy diesel engines rumbled through the neighborhood, far too loud for a sleepy suburb. Aku sipping his coffee on the porch, leaned forward as 3 county vehicles rolled down the street, 1 code enforcement truck, 1 utility vehicle, and a van that read county safety compliance. Behind them came Karen, her Lexus leading like a queen at the head of a parade. She was smiling again, triumphant, waving from her window as neighbors peeked through their blinds. Marcus set his mug down. Slowly, Karen was going all in. The convoy stopped at his gate. County officials climbed out, clipboards in hand, hard hats on some uniforms pressed and official. Karen strutted to the front, sunglasses perched on her nose, and crossed her arms. "Mr. Bryant," one officer called out, "we've received multiple complaints of safety violations on your property. We're here to conduct a mandatory inspection." Marcus's eyes flicked to Karen, then back to the officer. He didn't raise his voice. "Do you have a court order?" The officer shifted uncomfortably. "We have authorization from the county." "Office authorization is not a warrant," Marcus interrupted calmly. "You don't come through this gate without a judge's signature. That's the law." Karen pounced, stepping forward, her voice shrill. "He's obstructing justice. This man has turned his property into a public hazard. The HOA board has unanimously approved legal escalation. He's dangerous, he's unstable, and you have every right to take this property back for the safety." Of the community, the county team hesitated. They weren't used to being blocked this firmly. Most homeowners caved. The second officials showed up. But Marcus didn't budge, pulled his phone from his pocket, raised it high, and began recording. "This is Marcus Bryant," he said clearly. "Homeowner at 112 Cedar Ridge. I am being harassed by the HOA, president and county officials without a warrant. I've asked for proper legal documentation. They don't have it. I'm advising them to leave my property immediately." Karen's face twisted as neighbors peeked out further, cameras now recording from multiple porches. Her control of the narrative was slipping in real time. One of the county men muttered, "He's right. We need paperwork." Another added, "Let's go back and get authorization. We don't want a lawsuit on our hands." Karen spun on them. "Are you kidding me? You're going to let him intimidate you? Look at this fence. It's electrified. Do your job." The lead officer shook his head. "Ma'am, without a warrant, we're not crossing that gate. File it." Through the court system, the convoy slowly backed away, trucks turning around one by one. Karen was left standing in Marcus's driveway again, seething, her perfect hair catching the morning sun like a crown of fire. She turned to Marcus, who still held his phone high. "You think you're clever?" she spat. "You think you can embarrass me? This isn't over. You'll regret the day you moved here." Marcus only smiled faintly. "Funny. I was thinking the same about you." She stormed off, tires screeching as she sped away. But Marcus knew something had shifted. She wasn't just fighting him anymore, she was exposing herself. Neighbors had seen her fury, her desperation, her theatrics. They'd seen county officials retreat under his calm insistence on the law. Seeds of doubt were planted, and doubt was poison to Karen's empire. Still, Karen wasn't finished. That night, Marcus spotted shadows near his property line. He clicked on the floodlights and caught 2 patrol volunteers scrambling away, muttering curses. The next night, someone tossed a rock at his mailbox, denting the side. The night after, that spray paint appeared on his fence. Dangerous. Marcus documented everything. Photos, videos, timestamps. He filed a harassment report with the county sheriff's office and quietly contacted a lawyer friend in town. "It's not just about the fence anymore," he explained. "She's targeting me personally. I want to be ready." His lawyer chuckled. "Sounds like she's digging her own grave. Let her keep at it." Keep at it she did. Karen called an emergency HOA meeting the following week, sending out dramatic emails about a menace among us. She plastered the neighborhood bulletin board with notices about Marcus's illegal fortifications. She even had the audacity to stand in front of her house one afternoon with a megaphone, warning families to stay away from the Bryant property until the danger is resolved. But the more noise she made, the more cracks showed. Some neighbors whispered about how ridiculous it was after all. Nobody had been hurt, and Marcus had every right to protect his property. Others started muttering about Karen's long history of bullying tactics, her fines, her vendettas. One man who'd been fined for leaving his trash cans out spoke up during the meeting and said, "Maybe the problem isn't Marcus. Maybe the problem is you, Karen." The room went silent. Karen's face burned crimson, but the damage was done. She screamed, threatened, and banged her gavel, but authority once challenged never fully returns. Her empire was crumbling, and then came the final straw. One late evening, Marcus was sitting on his porch reading under the glow of a lamp when he heard rustling by the gate. He set his book down, watched quietly, and saw a figure climbing over. For a split second, he thought it was another patrol volunteer. But then the light caught the hair, the blazer, the unmistakable outline. It was Karen. She had actually scaled his fence, fury blazing in her eyes, muttering curses under her breath. As her foot touched the electrified gate, the zap was instantaneous. She shrieked, stumbled back, and fell flat onto the grass. Marcus rose slowly, setting his book aside. He walked to the edge of the porch, phone in hand, recording the entire scene. "You okay down there?" he called out dryly. Karen writhed, clutching her arm dramatically. You criminal. You assaulted me. You'll go to prison for this." Marcus kept his tone calm. "No, Karen. You trespassed on my property after multiple warnings. You climbed a gate that's clearly marked. Ass electrified. You hurt yourself breaking the law. He zoomed in on the signs posted every few feet. Private property, electrified gate, do not climb. She screamed louder, hoping to draw neighbors out. Lights flicked on across the street. People emerged onto porches, watching the spectacle. Karen, the queen of the HOA, lying in the dirt, shrieking accusations, while Marcus stood calm and composed with video evidence in hand. Moments later, a sheriff's cruiser rolled up. Marcus had already called. The deputy stepped out, took one look at the scene, and sighed. Karen Whitfield. She tried to climb my gate, Marcus explained, handing over his phone. It's all on video. Signs are posted. She's trespassing.
Grin.
Scrambled to her feet, dirt smeared on her designer skirt. He assaulted me. He's dangerous. Arrest him immediately. The deputy scrolled through the footage, unimpressed. Ma'am, he's telling the truth. You ignored posted warnings. And you've been formally reported for harassment multiple times. You're under arrest for trespassing and vandalism. The gasp from the neighbors was audible. Phones rose to capture the moment. Karen, sputtering and flailing, was handcuffed and led to the cruiser, her empire dissolving with every click of the cuffs. Marcus leaned against his porch railing, arms crossed, watching quietly. For the first time since moving in, he felt a real sense of peace. The war was over. Karen had lost. The HOA, humiliated by its president's antics, held an emergency vote the following week. Karen was stripped of her position, her fines voided, her power dismantled. Marcus's fence stood tall, unchallenged, and in the weeks that followed, something remarkable happened. Neighbors who had once avoided him began stopping by to chat. A man brought him a pie, sheepishly admitting he'd believed Karen's lies. Families waved when they passed his porch. The isolation lifted, replaced by a quiet respect. One evening, a neighbor asked him, "So what'll you do now? You won." Marcus chuckled softly, looking out at the electrified gate that had sparked it all. "What I always wanted to do," he said, "sit on my porch, mind my business, and live in peace." And for the first time since moving in, he actually could.